Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Today, if I had had my bat mitzvah, today would be my bat mitzvah portion because I was born, my Hebrew birthday was the 22nd of Sivan. And I love this message. And I entitled it Decisions, Decisions, Decisions. Everything we do begins and ends with a decision. And every day we make thousands of them. Will they result in something good or something bad? Will they lead to life or to death? God asks us to choose life. That means we have been given the ability to choose. Now in Parashat Shelach, the Israelites were at the border of the Promised Land. Moshe chose 12 men to enter. He said, go and survey the land, and he gave them very specific instructions on what information they were to bring back. Now, these were just not any men. They were princes of the 12 tribes. They had position, they had power, they had amassed possessions, and they were leaders. When they returned from completing the mission, however, they admitted the land was filled with milk and honey, but then they cried out, we're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than us. They weren't asked for their opinion. They were asked to bring a report. They made a decision based upon fear, instead of taking the time to stop and to remember all that God had done for them up to that moment. Do we have the ability to make a good decision when we are frozen with fear? Well, for sure not immediately, because our bodies go into what's called a fight and flight response. And that's for a reason. There are some things that we have to fear, but we may lose our control, our cool for a time, but later, once we calm down, we do have the option to switch our gears, to make a shift in our paradigms, to change our way of thinking, because God gave us the gift of free will. It's not mystical, although that mystical element is involved, but it depends upon, depends upon our willingness to choose to change our minds. We need to be willing to change our minds. It's far easier for us to give away our self-control by blaming others. Here they said, they're strong. They think that they're stronger than us, and we look to them like grasshoppers. When we apply that way of thinking, that understanding, to every area of our lives, any area where we feel stuck or trapped, then we need to be brutally honest with ourselves. And I repeat, we must be willing to decide to change our minds about it. That's step number one. The second step, which is a key element, is knowing that our God is right here, ready to help us after taking that first step. We may not always know what is holding us back, but again, if we ask our Creator, He will show us. He speaks to us in so many ways. Maybe someone else will say something to us from someone else's mouth, from an idea that we get. But it begins with an action. It begins with making a decision. Let me give you an example. I've been talking about this to everybody this week because I've been so overwhelmingly blessed by it. We've been having so much trouble. I've been having so much trouble with the company that hosts our congregation website. And I asked everybody for advice. And it felt so overwhelming that I finally decided, you know what, let's just stay where we are. And then I spoke to them and they offered us a great price to move to a new platform. Now, right after the migration was complete, all our emails disappeared. I was so upset that I burst into tears on the phone. The poor girl in the Philippines didn't know what to do. I know it sounds silly, but that was my immediate reaction. But after I hung up, I stopped and made the decision. I decided that emails are simply not worth losing my health over. If something was important, it'll come back. So I began thanking God for everything, and immediately I started to feel his peace, his shalom. So after all this fiasco happened, I decided, okay, I really need to get out of here and get to a new platform, a new company. And I was referred to a good one. I created the account, chose the level that we needed according to their advice. But before the whole thing was finalized, I noticed that I was missing one very important link. So I went online and I spent 3 hours with them, and no one could help me. I didn't know what to do, and I was so frustrated. I went to bed and I begged God for help. Then 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with the thought, is it possible that I chose the wrong plan? Somehow God spoke this idea into my mind. I got back on the computer at 3 in the morning, spoke to the person there, and it was true. We just needed to upgrade. I didn't have enough memory for what we needed. Wait, it didn't end there. The next morning I received an email from the place where we transferred out, telling me that I could get a refund for the service we weren't using. I called them, I spoke to a woman, she was an angel. And she told me that if I hadn't called that day, that I wouldn't have been able to receive the refund. It was the deadline. And not only did she refund us on the one, but on several products for hundreds of dollars. And then she found a way to bring up all the lost emails and set up a backup for the new one. I can't describe the awesome sensation. I felt like I was enveloped in a cloud of God's protection, and I knew that he was there. The lesson that I'm still learning is never give up. Don't be afraid to press on. Do not lose courage. And don't put myself down when I feel like a grasshopper faced with giants. That's the decision that a leader needs to make. Everyone in this community, whether we want to admit it or not, we have been called to be a leader. Now, what are the qualities of a good leader? A good leader is humble enough to know that he, and I'm using the male word he to include both genders, he cannot accept his role of serving others on his own. We need a community. We need others. A good leader desires to serve others, and seeks wise counsel from people who have a strong moral code. A good leader admits that he has strengths and weaknesses and surrounds himself with people who can help achieve their common goal. Now, these 12 scouts were chosen. They were chiefs, all leaders. They all saw the same land that they were asked to report on. They saw the same people living in the land, the same produce of the land, but 10 of them came back with a bad report, one that differed from that of Joshua and Caleb, who said, "We should go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." What makes one person decide to remain in fear while another chooses to have courage? And I say chooses for a good reason. I believe that most people do not choose to remain in fear consciously, but as I said before, there are certainly things we need to fear. But when we walk with our God, our soul becomes connected at a higher level, and that is what allows us to change our paradigms. If we choose to remain in fear like those 10 men, we lose the battle and possibly even our lives. Joshua told the men, "Be of good courage and bring back the fruit of the land." Now, the idea of good courage was spoken in the same breath as bringing the fruit of the land. We don't question the latter. Why would we question our choice to be of good courage? Can we choose to have courage? Now, in last week's portion, B'chalutcha, When the people were crying out for meat, for basar, we saw how fear and anxiety had caused them to see the worst about their situation, what they lacked rather than what they had. Fear and anxiety are contagious. The 10 scouts spread an evil report, resulting in the people weeping all night and then turning against Moses and Aaron to the point of wanting to stone them. The consequences were that the entire congregation, that entire generation, would die in the desert without entering the land promised to them. That's when our free will has to stand up and decide how we are going to live. We have to use His gift to choose life and not death, courage and not fear. And that takes a step of faith followed by an act of sheer iron will, coupled with the knowledge that God will never leave us nor forsake us. It's not enough to hear words of encouragement from someone. Oh, you'll get through this. It takes an act of will to accept it. Just as it takes an act of the will when a married man is confronted with a beautiful woman who's enticing him to cheat on his wife. Does he stop and remember his vows before the Lord to be faithful? Or does he succumb? It's an act of the will. It's a decision. These scouts were no longer young men, impulsive. They were in positions of authority and probably had a lot more positions than the younger men. This, believe it or not, becomes a problem as we age. When we're young, we take so many more chances because we think we have so much less to lose. But when we amass more and more, we become risk averse. And we need to remind ourselves that when we become afraid of losing everything, as I did, I had to remember that I shouldn't be afraid to start all over again, even at my age. That's what these men were facing. So what made them different from Joshua and Caleb? Joshua was of Hebrew descent. He had spent every moment under Moshe's tutelage. He was in the tent when God spoke to Moses. He was there on the mountain when Moses went up, when no one else was allowed near it. He had already been chosen to take Moses' place, although he didn't know it yet. And who was Caleb? His is a very different story. Although our illustrious rabbis disagree that he was a Ger, a Kenizzite, the Torah is clear. His family was probably from the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude who chose to follow the God of Israel because they had truly seen his works. They were integrated into the tribe of tribes, the tribe of Judah, from whom King David would descend, and later our Rabbi Yeshua. Caleb was led by his kavanah, his intention. To be chosen as one of the 12 scouts, meant that he must have clearly demonstrated his leadership abilities. I wondered why Hoshea's name was changed to Yehoshua, while Caleb's name remained the same. The Yud added to Hoshea shows us that God was with him, was added at a deeper level to his life. Now Caleb means dog, man's best friend, but no Hebrew would have named their son Dog. Yet God didn't add the Yud to Caleb's name. Could it be that a native-born Hebrew, who might have just taken his God for granted, had to change in order to draw closer to him, but not the Ger who took nothing for granted? Just an added thought, Numbers 15, 14 to 16 has one of the most important principles for us to embrace in the Torah regarding the Ger. Verse 16 says, Torah achat, one Torah, v'mishpat echad, and one ordinance shall be both for you and the stranger, the Ger who lives with you. Think about it. There are not two gods. nor any other book needed for both Hebrew and non-Hebrew. That's the picture we can draw from Joshua and Caleb entering the land together. The decision that these two men made stood them in good stead. To muster up all their courage, to stand up above the rest who refused to see the truth of their circumstances, that the promises of their God were all that they needed. Their reward was that they were the only men of that generation to enter the promised land. Not Miriam, not Aaron, not even Moses. Our decisions lead us either to a life of fulfillment in our relationships and in our roles, or one of constant discouragement. I remember years ago when I worked in hypnotherapy, I saw the effects of the power of suggestion. And in those days, the power of positive thinking was the modus operandi. But both these ideas, both these ways of living, turn into empty exercises without the help of our Creator walking with us throughout our lives. Why? The Proverbs tell us, as a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. We can choose to blame others, and maybe even God, for how we live. But the truth is that once we truly know that God is an ever-present help in our lives, we have no more excuses. Will our decisions, our choices lead us toward death or life? God asks us to choose life, and His Torah provides us with the tools to do so. Shabbat Shalom.